Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, and with me once again, the former Chelsea left fullback Scott Minto. And we're delighted to have the international football expert Kevin Hatchard here as well after what was a fantastic weekend in the Premier League. So let's start with a top of the table clash on Sunday, and boy, was it dramatic. Well, Arsenal delivered a serious blow to Liverpool's title hopes after beating them by 3-1. Scott and I were at the game. I know, Kev, you were watching it keenly, probably from behind your sofa, watching Alisson commit blunder after blunder after blunder. What on earth was going on at the back?
Yeah, it was a horrible moment for Alisson and Virgil van Dijk. And I think Van Dijk was very honest afterwards and admitted that it was chiefly his fault. And I think it was. I think you look at it, you know, he's not strong enough in holding off Martinelli. He should clear the ball. And because he doesn't clear the ball, that means that Alisson comes racing out and he can't actually get around Van Dijk to clear it. But I think if you look at the game in general, Liverpool made such a poor start. You look at the first quarter of the game, I thought Arsenal could have been 3-0 up if they'd been more ruthless. Actually, they made plenty of openings, and it was reminiscent of the way they started the FA Cup game. Actually, Arsenal had plenty of chances in the first half. In that one, didn't take them. And I just think Liverpool took a bit too long to get going. It took far too long to get Trent Alexander-Arnold on the ball. Having said that, having been gifted a goal on the stroke of half-time, then in the second half, I actually thought Liverpool started playing really well. I thought the early part of the second half, I thought they were excellent. And I thought, wow, this has really changed. And this is where Liverpool might push on and win it. And then a horrible moment. But I have to give enormous credit to Martinelli, because I think that mistake from Van Dijk only comes because Martinelli has caused them so many problems previously. And they were so terrified of his pace that it panicked them into making that error.
You think it's a revision problem. The fact is they've gone back and looked at what he was like against them before, and as a result of it, they started to panic. But they panicked right from the very off, and actually Van Dijk was poor from the very start of the game. There was one point where he sort of pushed a pass into midfield, which was never on, playing across the face of his own goal, and he caused them all sorts of issues. He was lucky to get away with it on that occasion. There was a little tangle with Saka earlier on where Saka could have gone down, and that could have resulted in a penalty. But at half-time, I turned to Scott. Right, we were sitting at the bottom of the main stand at the Emirates Stadium, and I turned to Scott, with a little whiff of hot dogs in the background, those big foot-long sausages that they have at the Emirates, and I said to him, "Mate, there is no way in this world that Liverpool are going to be as bad in the second half as they were in the first." And they came out all guns blazing, and then they made two massive errors, and basically that's cost them 3 points in the game, or at least a point in the game. And this was a game they shouldn't have lost.
No, actually, Sam, the first thing you said was, "I want that foot-long sausage." That's what you said, the hot dog. And then you said Liverpool won't be as bad in the second half. And absolutely, Kev's right. They were really good. And we all said, we were with Nigel Adley at the time as well, that if anyone is going to go on and win this game, we believe it will be Liverpool. So to make that mistake, and it was a double mistake because Van Dijk's got to be heading that away. But once that's bounced and Alisson's coming out, he has got to deal with that situation, and he hasn't. So you rightly said on commentary, the both of them had really poor games. And that's exactly what happened. When things are really tight, it depends on moments, whether it's a bit of skill, a bit of class, or actually a big mistake. And I do agree with Kevin. It was not just about how Martinelli's played against Liverpool before. I thought he was very good on the day. I was actually really surprised that he got taken off and he wasn't happy about it. But his pace absolutely scares opposition, and he certainly scared the Liverpool defence today.
Yeah, do you remember that program they used to do on MTV, Celebrity Deathmatch? It was probably about 30 years old now, where they used to just put celebrities, like plastic celebrities, in sort of like plaster scene versions of them fighting on the television. I would like to do like a rapid race match where you pick your fantasy races between fast footballers in the Premier League. I want to see Martinelli against Mickey van der Ven, and I want to see Carl Walker take on the winner because he's so fast, Martinelli, isn't he? I mean, he's so rapid that he sends shivers down the spine of any fullback, Kev.
Yeah, I think he's a terrific player. There was that one moment, wasn't there, where he raced down the left and Konate, who is quick, was really struggling to keep up with him. I think he's a terrific player. I think he's getting better all the time. I know some people think he'd be better through the middle. I actually think he's great out wide because he just opens up those spaces for others because he drags people out of position. That's the thing. And I just think he is such a terrific young player with so much potential. And when you got Saka on the other side, it causes so many problems for teams. But I think, again, what it showed was, I know Gabriel Jesus was missing, but they don't have that player who has that real instinct in the middle. They play so many quality balls into the centre sometimes. And I think a top-class striker who has those instincts would make the most of those. So I still think they're missing a bit in that area. But yeah, I thought Martinelli caused them all kinds of problems. And he was always in the back of Liverpool's minds.
And that is a problem, isn't it? That focal point, that centre forward. We bemoaned it during the course of the game, Scott and I. We were talking about exactly that. You know, they've got to have someone present inside the box because all of this great play down the left and the right actually isn't coming to anything. And Liverpool could have taken advantage. On a different day, they probably would have taken advantage. But the scoreline is the scoreline. And Liverpool have lost ground in the title race. They've given away points to Arsenal, who are a title rival. But really, Scott, are the main beneficiaries of today's result Manchester City? I mean, should we just get the trophy out now, tie the blue and white ribbons on it and just pass it over and forget the rest of the season or go on holiday to Dubai or something?
Well, we can go on holiday to Dubai if you want, Sam. I'm happy to do that with you, but I'm not having
as long as you're paying.
That's a shock. I'm not having that Man City are gonna have definitely won it now. Look, you know I said at the start of the season I still fancy City to do it, but this was the season really after 5 of the last 6 seasons they've won the Premier League, having won the treble as well. They're not going to be quite at it, but they will be in the second half of the season. And a team needs to be 5 to 8 points ahead. So look, we went into this game saying, and the big picture here is for Arsenal actually, not for Liverpool. As much as Liverpool have lost ground and City have probably chosen, if they want someone to win, it would be Arsenal. But actually, this was a must-win game for Arsenal. If they were to lose this one, then 8 points, I'm sorry, they're not catching Liverpool up and they're not bettering what Manchester City can do from here and in, having played 2 games more as well. So whether it was by hook or by crook, whether it was a mistake, whatever it was brilliance, Arsenal had to find a way to win this game, and they did. And look, yeah, City absolutely would be the beneficiaries of that. There's still a long way to go, and they've got the Champions League, they've got the FA Cup. People have talked about Liverpool with the quadruple potentially. There's still the double treble potentially for Manchester City, but there's still so many games to play from here and in. And that would have given Arsenal a massive psychological boost.
Yes, and that was what it all was about, wasn't it? The passion, the energy at the end, and the fact that Mikel Arteta was rather revelling in the victory. And a few Liverpool supporters have been phoning up, calling talkSPORT, suggesting that maybe Mikel Arteta has over-celebrated. There's a few memes doing the round saying, has he won the World Cup, etc., etc. I mean, Kev, as a fully paid up member of the Liverpool fan club, are you subscribing to the idea that Mikel Arteta probably went a little bit over the top? Or is it what we want to see? We want managers to be passionate. We want them to be delighted when they get one over on a title rival.
Yeah, total opposite. Resist the fun police at all opportunities. Honestly, it's one of the things in football and in sport that drives me insane when people start saying, oh, he's gone a bit over the top, hasn't he? Or, oh, they're celebrating too much. What are we in this for? They've just beaten the title rival. It's one of their most important wins of the season. Why would you not celebrate it? Why would you just stoically shake hands with everybody and say, well, that was a job well done? It drives me nuts. I don't understand. It's just a bit of bitterness, really, I think. But I'm always really skeptical about people who accuse people of over-celebrating. It's just really po-faced.
Yeah, especially in a game like this, because it was such a big game. And as Scott has already said, they had to win this today, and they did. And as a result of doing so, they've made it very, very tight at the top. Also, it means that if Manchester City win both their games in hand against Brentford, they go top of the table. They play Brentford on Monday night. In a couple of weeks, they play Brentford again at the Etihad Stadium. If they win both those games and all the games in between, and they will be on top of the table. Ominous? Probably. Right, let's move on from that game and talk about another big headline-making match on Sunday afternoon. Chelsea 2, Wolverhampton Wanderers 4. Chelsea defeated at home by Wolves. Cunha hat-trick, Neto excellent. Gary O'Neal doing a quite brilliant job. I will happily let anyone rant about Chelsea, but Wolverhampton Wanderers have beaten Spurs, Man City, Chelsea twice, drawn with Newcastle and Aston Villa, and should have got something from their games against Liverpool and Manchester United. Is Gary O'Neal, Scott, getting enough praise?
No, I don't think he is. We talked about how, he was absolutely fantastic at Bournemouth and can count himself very unlucky indeed as to him getting sacked. We understood the reasons why. We know about the philosophy that Iraola has, and we can see what he's implementing now. But the job he did last season was incredible. When you think about where most Wolves fans weren't enamoured by the appointment, were they, at the start of the season? And look where they are now. They're top half of the table. They're 6 points off sixth. Now, no one's suggesting necessarily that they're going to go on and finish in that top 6 place, but the fact that we're talking about them, looking up rather than down, I think shows it's an absolutely sensational job that Gary O'Neal's done. They've got some really good players, but Lopetegui was saying this squad isn't good enough and I want to walk away. Well, look what Gary O'Neal's doing with the squad.
Yeah, he's done a fantastic job. It is a light squad, and he sort of pointed that out today after the game. But ultimately, they've done brilliantly to get into the top half of the table right now as we speak, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Okay, time for the Chelsea debrief. I want you each to give me just 3 words that sum up Chelsea right now. I'm going to get you started. Inconsistent, impotent, and divided. Kev, go.
Disjointed, toxic, and at the top level, arrogant.
Scott.
Ooh, confused. I'd agree, absolutely agree with disjointed. Can I put a double one in? There's no leadership.
Okay, all right. Leadership list.
Leaderless.
Maybe that will do.
Leaderless.
Rudderless. Maybe rudderless is the best word there.
Rudderless. Let's go with that
It's
one.
a collaborative effort. This is a collaborative effort. Kev, I spoke to you briefly prior to the start of the podcast, and you said, I am going to tear strips off Chelsea. Go for it.
Well, no, look, at a certain level of the club, because I think, we could talk about managers all we want. We could talk about players all we want. Ultimately, the people who have to carry the can are the owners, because I think now they've had long enough, they've spent enough, and you have to look at the overall strategy and you have to conclude that they came into football thinking they had the magic formula, thinking if we bring in all of these young talents together, if we put them on long contracts, if we do this, we have gamed the system, we're really smart, and we're going to do it this way. And what you've ended up doing is you've ended up creating a toxic environment. You have collected some of the best young players in Europe, and you are crushing them flat. Because what you've tried to do is pivot from a club that had a boom and bust cycle for over 20 years. And you've said to that fan base, if you wouldn't mind, we're just going to develop this young group of players and it's going to take a while. And as soon as there was a bit of toxicity with Graham Potter, and I'm not saying he was necessarily the right man for the job, and I expressed reservations about that when he got the job, but having hired him, at the first sign of a few boos and toxicity, they panicked and they got rid of him. The Frank Lampard spell was a joke and a waste of everybody's time. And that's nothing against Frank necessarily, but it was a waste of everybody's time. It set them back. And now you have players who have succeeded at other clubs, who've shown immense promise at other clubs, and they've come into a club that is just surrounded by negativity. And I'm not even taking aim at the fans because I get it. I understand how jarring it must be to have supported the club that's battled for honours for so long, and suddenly they're also Rans. But have they done their bit? Because some of the discourse around Chelsea has become so very toxic.
Yeah, I mean, look, Pat Nevin was brilliant in the Sun newspaper on Sunday, in which he basically said the squad looks like it's been picked by an algorithm, and if you think that's going to work immediately, you've got another thing coming. And the second thing he said was, look, I've been a chief executive. I've run Motherwell Football Club. I've also got a background in economics and in finance. And I can tell you now that it was all a very clever idea with this sort of amortization over the course of 7 or 8 years in terms of player contracts. But that only works if you keep the same level of income coming into your football club. And if you end up producing a squad that can't compete at the top end of the table and therefore slips out of the Champions League, then you lose over £100 million a year from the prize money that you would have got from being in that competition. And you might be able to swallow that once, but you can't swallow that twice, 3 times in a row, because all of a sudden then the amount of money that's coming into the club isn't at the same level. You're still spending the same amount of money on those players' contracts, and yet you are going to end up creeping over your £105 million losses over 3 years if you continue to be outside the Champions League. Therefore, you'll then get hit with points deductions. Therefore, you'll then fall further down the table. Then the Champions League thing becomes even more difficult to get back into. And the whole business operation falls apart. The other issue you've got is the transfer market's gone completely flat over the last 12 months. As a result of that, the whole business model and the idea behind Chelsea has completely been thrown out of the window. So they've got massive, massive trouble there. The other problem you've got is that people are starting to kick off in the dressing room. Cheers, Thiago Silva. Is he gunning for Poch's job? His wife, Bella Silva, decided to tweet after Chelsea had gone within 2 goals of Wolverhampton Wanderers, 4-2 at the time. Her husband scored the goal. It's time to change. If you wait any longer, it will be too late. 2 blue hearts. Not sure it's very blue-hearty to send that out. She doesn't do that, Scott, and certainly doesn't keep it there. I would have thought it would have been deleted by now. It isn't. Without his approval, or at least his sort of tacit sort of acceptance that she's allowed to do that. Look, I mean, he's not there to control her, but what I mean by that is she should be a little bit more tactful if he's not supporting her through that. Does he want to be the manager?
Well, that I don't know, Sam. But the bottom line is, if Thiago Silva, and everyone's entitled to tweet what they want to tweet, within reason, of course, but Pochettino needs to have a meeting with Thiago Silva ASAP. He needs to know whether they're his thoughts or just his wife's thoughts. Because if they're his thoughts as well, he has a massive problem. And he's got to look after himself first and foremost. Because Thiago Silva, and we've talked about, I agree absolutely everything that both of you have said. And I've said it on this pod many, many times about the way that the new owners have gone. But what do we do from here? And it looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better. Certainly there's no sign, there's no green shoots to say, okay, that's half a dozen results that's going positive. I can see a pattern of play and everyone looks very well organised, whoever comes in. If Thiago Silva's wife's saying that and Thiago Silva believes that, then there's a real problem. And Kev used the word toxic around the club. Well, it's toxic in the dressing room if one of your major leaders has that thought pattern and opinion. Does he want to be a manager? Well, he's doing his coaching badges, but does he really expect that he's going to be manager of Chelsea? I would doubt it. But to say something like that, which can only lead us to think that she's talking about Pochettino going and the sacking of that, then he needs to nip this in the bud immediately.
Come on, Kev. I mean, she can't be that naive. He's worked at Milan. He's worked at PSG. We all know just from our own experiences of tweeting and putting things out on social media that you have to be very careful about how you phrase things and when you say them and at what times you say them. She will know exactly what she is doing here. How much of a problem is this?
I mean, she does have form for this. She has been quite outspoken previously. So I don't think this is completely unusual. But what it does is it does put Thiago Silva in a difficult position, because I think he has to be squeaky clean. He has to be beyond reproach, because in a really young squad, he's the leader they look to. And so if that kind of messaging is getting out there, whether it's through him or whether it's through people close to him, there's got to be an element of crisis comms about this, I think. And I think this has got to be dealt with. What this comes down to ultimately is, if you change the coach, fine, what then? Because you've changed Potter, which I thought was a mistake. You've then brought in Lampard. You've then brought in Pochettino. where do you go from here? You still have the same problems. An unbalanced squad that's low on confidence, a lot of young players who, let's not forget as well, take some of these guys, right? Moises Caicedo was at Brighton, really smoothly run football club, good coaching, good environment in which to develop. Now he's in this. Enzo Fernandez at Benfica, club that was used to winning, club that was doing well in the Champions League, smart coach. Now he's in this. I'm not absolving players of blame. They've played poorly at times. What I'm saying is it's very, very difficult for these guys with huge potential to thrive in the environment they have created. And that's the bare truth of it.
And also, look, Thiago Silva, he's not absolved of any blame either, by the way. He's been part of this team. He was in the defence that conceded 4 goals to Wolverhampton Wanderers on this very day. You know, Scott and I have had a conversation many times about his role in the team and whether or not at 39 actually is a good idea that he is in the heart of defence week in, week out, especially when we've heard from behind the scenes that he's given certain instructions and then goes out on the pitch after agreeing to those certain instructions and does something completely different, which doesn't help anybody. Because if you're a manager trying to set a team up and this is your instructions that you've given the players, and then one of your senior players goes and does something completely different and against your advice, then you've got no chance whatsoever to be able to fulfill a tactical plan. It is a problem. It is something that is going to become headline making. And unless they nip it in the bud, it is going to be something that Pochettino is going to be asked about over the next couple of days. They've got a huge game in the FA Cup against Aston Villa on Wednesday night live on talkSPORT. And it is... Well, it's going to be full of scrutiny, I think, because if they perform badly in that, then certainly there will be more questions asked about where the club is going. It's a long-term project. We all know that, but I'm not necessarily sure that it is a long-term project that has been fashioned with any real sort of seriously long-term insight. Because things have changed. The market's changed, and the way that we do business in football, I think, has changed as well. Let's move on to Manchester United. They beat West Ham by 3-0. There is an image doing the rounds of 3 very confident young men sitting on an advertising board on the perimeter of the pitch. Rasmus Højlund and Kobbie Mainoo flanking the goal scorer of Manchester United's second and third goals, Alejandro Garnacho. It's an image I think you will see a lot over the next few years. And it was, just one win. It's just one win. It was a comfortable win. It was a home win. But afterwards, Erik ten Hag, Scott, says, no one believed me when I told you there was potential in this group. Is he right to put his long-term faith in the potential of those 3 in particular?
Listen, we don't see what goes on a day-to-day basis. He does. We've talked about, as long as the cows come home, about the culture, how bad it is. Quite often, not always, but quite often the youngsters can be moulded. And if he believes those, it's interesting Marcus Rashford wasn't in there. Would have been nice in a way to say another incredibly talented youngster in there, and that's the future of Manchester United. But these 3, I was really pleased, first of all, for Rasmus Højlund. He's had a lot of stick, obviously, the big pressure of the price tag. He's not been scoring goals in the first half of the season. I thought that was a really well-taken goal. Garnacho, I think, is a massive talent. He really is. And Kobbie Mainoo, I mean, the goal he scored against Wolves was almost like a senior pro. So, absolutely. And also senior players are coming back. And he's always said as well that if he gets everyone fit, then Manchester United is very competitive. And looking at the table right now, they're in 6th position and they're very much looking up to see if they can chase down Tottenham Hotspur 6 points above them. And if they finish in 5th place, then that could well be a Champions League place. Who would have thought that a couple of weeks ago?
And it helps that Rasmus Højlund is scoring goals. 21 today, celebrated with a very odd-looking air guitar celebration, which was sort of a cross between an air guitar and a sort of hobby horse celebration. I couldn't really quite work it out, but it is air guitar. He's confirmed it. His mate in Denmark told him to do it. I'm not sure it's going to catch on like Sue. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. It was an all-round good display, actually, from Manchester United. It was the blending midfield that caught my eye. Casemiro and Mainoo, old and young, yin and yang, they worked together well, Kev.
Yeah, I thought they did. I mean, part of that is Mainoo, who I think is a sensational player. I know we shouldn't hype up young players too much, but honestly, I cannot remember a guy in that kind of position of that age playing with such composure and clarity. He very rarely gives the ball away. He's got a great idea of space around him. The way he took the goal was sensational at Molineux. Absolutely sensational. So I think there's huge potential with him. I wasn't as sold on the performance, if I'm honest, because if you actually look at the chances West Ham had, there were quite a few openings that they created.
22.
Yeah, well, Emerson had that big chat before the second goal goes in. Emerson is clean through and just realizes he's Emerson and blazes the ball over the bar because he's not a regular goal scorer. So he kind of made a really good run and then went, what do I do now? And just blazed it over. And he had another opportunity as well after the second goal goes in. So I still feel with them, and I've said this before, it's all a bit improvised jazz for me. It's all a bit off the cuff. It's about individual quality. It's about what players can produce. I don't feel like it's a philosophy. It's a team thing. I think it's just kind of stuff that happens. And I still think they make odd decisions. I thought Harry Maguire was all over the shop today, actually. So, look, it's not perfect. I don't think they're anywhere near the teams at the top four right now. But there are players I love very much. I love Mainu. Højlund is great. That was an Atalanta goal, by the way. That when he was on top form for Atalanta, shift away from the defender, smash it in from the edge of the area. That's when he was on great form for them. So I think he's got a big ceiling. Garnacho, we'll see.
Yeah, they're not perfect, and I don't think we should pretend they are. 22 shots West Ham had on their goal today. Onana had to make a couple of really good saves early on. But they're a good team, West Ham United. They're 6th in the table for a reason. So they were always going to get chances against Manchester United, especially bearing in mind they concede so many goals. I think they were helped out by Alessandro Martinez being back, but now he's picked up a big injury. And I just wonder how worrying that will be for Manchester United going forward. And we should talk a little bit more about David Moyes, though, because he was ruining those chances in his post-match interviews, the ones that Kev's already mentioned and the saves that Onana made as well. It was a rare defeat for West Ham. I mean, let's have a look at the table, where they are. Let's look at the run that they've been on, and they've only just ended up losing a game. But their fans are very quick to get disgruntled. What else can David Moyes do, Scott? Because he can't cease being David Moyes.
No, and I think that's the issue in many ways, and we touched on it in the show, didn't we? This is a golden period for West Ham in recent history, in terms of what they've done in the league in recent seasons. Obviously, not so much last season, but the 2 seasons before it, 6th and 7th, a Europa League semi-final, a Europa League conference win, the first major European or any trophy in over 40 years. And they were, before kickoff, 6th in the league, and as Kev said, created 22 chances against Manchester United. So I don't know what more he can do apart from, I've watched West Ham quite a lot this season, and a David Moyes team can be very solid. It can be a bit dour. It's not necessarily a sort of exciting Harry Redknapp where you kind of got so many quality players, and it was almost like just do something, in the final third. It's all very methodical, all very organised. And listen, I played for West Ham, and I'm loath to sort of say the West Ham way, but they're quite happy, or they'll settle for a really good, entertaining game. If you win 4-3, if you lose 3-2, they go home, they finish mid-table, but you really go for a cup trophy as well. And I think the Carabao Cup was very disappointing. I know to lose at Anfield, anybody can do it. And obviously they beat Manchester United and Arsenal straight after. But I think West Ham fans would have taken, lose to Man U, maybe even to Arsenal as well, if it have really gone for it at Anfield. Because whether you finish 7th or whether you finish 8th or 9th, well, yeah, okay, you can get into Europa League conference. But West Ham want their team to be going for it, the fans. And I don't think David Moyes does that. He always looks quite far ahead. But I go back to the fact of the bottom line is, you look at what has happened in the last 3 years. He's kept them up. He's got them into Europe. He got them deep into Europe one year, and then he won the trophy the following year. It's a difficult one because every time they don't play well, the fans come out.
Yeah. Just checking around here. We are past the watershed. If you're watching and it isn't past the watershed, right, just fast forward the next minute or so, right? Kev, you're not easily offended, are you? Are you easily offended?
Absolutely not.
You're not. Okay, all right. I just want to check because I don't want to upset anybody. And sometimes you have to warn people. It's always good to warn people. This is a bit PG-13, this next bit that's coming into conversation. So if you're easily offended, look away now. Okay, we've given you the opportunity. Kev, have you ever been cupped?
No, not to my knowledge.
The reason I'm asking is because David Moyes made a big complaint in the press conference after the game that there was too much cupping going on, and he didn't realise that cupping was allowed in football.
Wow.
Kev, you have been cupped. According to David Moyes, you have been cupped.
Okay. This is it depends on whether it's what definition of cupping there is. I think that's what we're getting to the heart of.
I tried to Google cupping whilst I was at the Emirates Stadium, and the Emirates
Not
Stadium
a good idea, I imagine.
banned me from doing so. It came up with a privacy screen, and I wasn't allowed to go any further. I have since checked the Urban Dictionary for cupping, it is, as you may think, it is when someone touches a male's something and gently checks to see that everything is there. Now, I don't think that is what he meant. I'm not sure. Maybe that is what went on at the corner that he was complaining about, but I'm not sure that's what he meant. But I mean, it was a direct quote, and he kept saying it, didn't he? He kept saying, he then
it
sort
wasn't
of
something
defined
I
it as
noticed
grabbing
in the
someone
game.
around the chest.
I thought I'd watched that game quite carefully. Clearly, I didn't watch it carefully enough.
You need to press the red button, Kev.
He did actually define what he saw as cupping, didn't he? And it was he basically said putting your arms around someone, both arms. So, I think he meant around.
What do you mean by around someone? Because that's sort of the key definer, isn't it?
Oh, bless little innocent Moyesy.
I can't believe that there's anything innocent about David Moyes. He's been around a very long time. Anyway, enough about cupping. Let's get on to Saturday now and the game that pushed Unai Emery's men back into the top four. Sheffield United 0, Aston Villa 5. Look, I mean, what a fantastic first 30 minutes it was, 35 minutes. They were absolutely sensational, Aston Villa. But, Scott Minto, Sheffield United were rank.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's important for Villa to bounce back after that defeat against Newcastle as well. But to go, what was it? 3-0 up after 20 minutes, 4-0 up after 29 minutes, and 5-0 up just inside the start of the second half. I mean, Sheffield United fans must have been looking at it and thinking this could be double figures here. It's a tough one because I don't know what more Chrissy Wilder can do. You know, he's clearly wanting and working towards a way that he wants his team to play, but there's only so much he can do in terms of the defenders and the quality of defending and even organisation and how quickly Villa counter-attacked. I mean, they were absolutely clinical and brutal. But if you're up against...
far too much space, though, Scott. Far too much space. You can't give Ollie Watkins that sort of space. I mean, he's almost as fast as Martinelli.
Well, is he in the quarterfinals then? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, he's in the next round. You qualify to race Ollie Watkins, yeah.
Okay. Look, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, but short of just sitting back and doing nothing at home at Bramall Lane, I just thought Villa were fantastic. They were brutal. You know, Ollie Watkins with his movement, I think, lots of different people score goals. Ollie Watkins himself could have had a hat-trick. But we know that Sheffield United are going down and they'll probably finish bottom. They won't pick up many more points from now to the end of the season. And we know, I'm pretty sure that Chris Wilder's already planning for next season. The players there aren't good enough. Paul Heckingbottom was always going to struggle this season after what was an incredible season. And sometimes by getting promoted, it brings you closer to the sacking. That's what's happened to Paul Heckingbottom. We know that he weren't allowed to bring in as many players as he wanted. It's a tough time at the moment if you're a Sheffield United fan.
Yeah, I mean, Aston Villa can do this to you. They've got a brilliant attacking lineup. And with Bailey, with Tielemans, with John McGinn, who's playing very well at this moment in time, Watkins, the speed on the counter-attack, the high line, they've just got a lot of good things going for them. And when it all clicks well, they can dismantle you. And Chelsea need to be aware of that for their Wednesday night game against them at Villa Park, because I tell you what, they could really take Chelsea to the cleaners.
After what's happened this weekend, I really worry for that game. And I'm hoping somehow Chelsea pull out the most amazing performance, because My goodness me, how brutal Villa were and how poor Chelsea were. It could be another 5-0.
Yeah, I mean, they could get absolutely battered at Villa Park on Wednesday night. I mean, listen, I hope that doesn't happen because I think that would probably be a misrepresentation of the work that Pochettino has done. He sort of said tonight already, that we're not good enough at the moment. That's the reality. I'm the one responsible for the situation, so it's me first. But we show today that we are not good enough. They've got to go there and show that they are good enough. But how do you stop Aston Villa when they're playing in this sort of form? Because that they've got a great chance of getting into the top four here, Kev, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. And I think one of the things that we need to focus on is that incredible pass by Douglas Luiz with the outside of his boot. And that just underlines what he's capable of. He set up Ollie Watkins with an amazing pass. Not only was Watkins impressive, Douglas Luiz impressive, but Leon Bailey is now the Leon Bailey he was always meant to be. And what I mean by that is when he came through in Belgian football, you knew he was talented. You'd seen the tapes. You knew he was quick. You knew he scored some spectacular goals. He came to Germany and you'd see flashes of it. You'd see him do incredible things. You'd see him zoom past fullbacks. You'd see him curl a ball in from the corner of the area into the top corner and score. And then he goes 6-7 games and he disappear entirely. I think he maybe, if he's honest with himself, was thinking of the very biggest clubs in the world at one stage and maybe ran before he could walk. And now I think he's got an outstanding coach in Unai Emery, and he's finding that consistency that he's always lacked previously in his career. I think Unai Emery, as you guys know, I'm an enormous fan of his. He's a football obsessive. Tactically, I think he's outstanding. And he's getting the absolute most out of that squad of players. They're talented, but the coach has added value, and coaches aren't always able to do that.
Oliver George Arthur Watkins has got 11 goals in 23 matches in the Premier League and 10 assists. He's the first player across Europe's top 5 leagues to do that in the league. I know that other players have done that in all competitions, but in just the league in which he's playing in, 11 goals and 10 assists. How outstanding is that, Scott? And has he cemented his place as Harry Kane's backup?
Well, I've been saying pretty much all season, after seeing him 6 weeks into it, that he would be my backup for Harry Kane. Don't get me wrong, it'd be a big blow. And as good as, say, a Jude Bellingham is, I think Harry Kane, if we were to lose one player, I wouldn't want to lose him, because to rely on Ollie Watkins to win the Euros, and I believe we can, would be tough on him. But I do think he's that good that he would be next in line. And in terms of how many goals and how many assists he's got, that's not easy to do. Normally goal scorers, they score the goals and it's almost 3 times, 4 times their assists. Whereas wide players, unless you're a Mo Salah, say, your assists are that much higher than the goals. For him to be that consistent with both, I think just goes to show just how good a player he is. And again, I agree with Kev. Emery's got really good talent there, but this is the manager who's come in, got them away from the relegation zone, got them into Europe, and got them realistically chasing for the Champions League now. And I think what he's done with him is he's not necessarily taken away from those channel runs, but I think he's made Ollie Watkins realise that he doesn't have to do it every single time and stay between the sticks, because the ball will come to you. And also, if someone else is in a better position, don't be selfish. You'll get your goals. That's what he's done, and he's got his assists. It's an amazing feat so far.
Yeah, it's been terrific. Everton 2, Tottenham Hotspur 2 was a brilliant game. I was at this on Saturday, 12:30. Many 12:30s you go to are not full of great atmosphere and exciting and end-to-end and open, because everyone's still a little bit lethargic about the fact they've only just got up. But this game sort of bucked that trend. It was a really sort of swashbuckling match where actually, despite taking the lead, I thought Everton were probably the better side across the whole of the piece compared to Tottenham. And Tottenham started well, got their goal, and then sort of sat off a little bit and invited the pressure. And eventually they found a way through Everton. It was from 2 set pieces, but they deserved their point at least in this game. Richarlison's on a fantastic run of goal-scoring form. We talked about Ollie Watkins, but this guy, he started to smash goals in left, right and centre. It's something like 9 in these last 8 Premier League games recently for Richarlison. And that's really important, isn't it? And this is a football team, Kev, that if they could defend a little bit better, would be much higher up the table.
Yeah, Richarlison, we always had the quality, right? He always had that, but he's admitted, sometimes the pressure can be a bit much. I admire him for that. I admire him for how honest he is. And I admire him for the guts and determination he's got, because under Antonio Conte, it had obviously gone horribly wrong. He didn't have a coach that particularly believed in him. He had a coach that was quite open about his shortcomings, and he's been built back up. And I always think Richarlison is best is an instinctive player. And you look at the number of one-touch finishes he produces when he's on form. It's really quite remarkable. I thought the way he took his goals was sensational, and it's a lovely option for Tottenham to have. And when Son is back, and obviously South Korea are doing very well, so he's still out there. But when he's back, that's going to be a nice problem for Ange Postecoglou to have. But shows you, and this goes back to the Chelsea thing just very briefly, confidence is so, so important. You can take a player who looks as though they've never played the game before, give them their confidence back, and all of that quality and that potential comes back to the fore. And Richarlison's a wonderful example of that.
Big Ange, who's not actually that big in real life, he wasn't happy, actually. It was a bit downbeat after the game. And whenever you lose in the last minute, he didn't lose. They just drew. They just dropped points in the last minute. They didn't lose. Whenever you drop points in the last minute, it always hurts us just that little bit more. And he was very sort of downbeat, whispering down here, looking at the floor as he was talking to me in the tunnel after the game. However, it was the first time, I don't know if you saw this on Match of the Day, Scott, it was the first time I've ever heard Big Ange, who told us all that we must accept all the refereeing decisions that are given, started to get a little bit narky with the old referee. He wasn't happy about that. It seems now, he says, that the referees are letting a lot more go. He was talking about Vicario and the pressure that he was under. They conceded a goal from a set piece on Friday night of last week against Manchester City. And since then, I mean, everyone who's played them have been like bees round a honeypot. Sorry, Guillermo, we are coming for you. And he wasn't strong enough again.
No, I noticed that. I mean, you got to be careful what you say at times because it will come back to bite you. And while he didn't have it wasn't a stinging criticism of the referees. It
just dropped it in. Just dropped it in.
Absolutely. Look, we know what Everton are about. We know they struggle to score goals. We know that Dominic Calvert-Lewin hadn't scored in 16 games. We know that they're strong on set pieces. And what happens? They score 2 more goals on set pieces, and that's 13 in total. And set pieces may well keep Everton up. So what do you expect if you go to Goodison Park, or even if you play them at home? You expect them to try and get as many set pieces as possible, put the ball underneath the goalkeeper and surround him as much as possible. Look, I've seen it happen a lot now this season, and I just wonder whether goalkeepers, they're being asked to almost play like central midfielders at the moment, but they're losing their kind of strength in get out the way. You know, I'm going to come through you. I'm going to come through my own defender. If I hurt someone,
do you think they're less strong? Do you think they're stopping doing body work in the gym and making themselves bulkier and stronger like they were in the past, and they're concentrating more on being footballers? Is that what you think has happened?
I don't necessarily say they're less strong, but I definitely think because of they're concentrating more on their feet. And I saw Dean Henderson did an interview with him and asked him that question. He said, yeah, it's quite strange, isn't it? You know, but first and foremost, I still see myself as trying to save the shot and keep the ball out the net. But because of Pep Guardiola and the way he plays, a lot of managers are following suit as well. They're asking kids, goalkeeper kids are being asked to play almost like, if not number 10s, then certainly number 6s. And I just think almost everybody, even central defenders, are not the tough guys that they used to be. Goalkeepers are not the tough guys they used to be. So if you are meeting an Everton who are struggling, who perhaps haven't got that quality to open up a team and open play, they are going to stick the ball underneath the goalkeeper and get as many players around and say, try and deal with that. It's not a foul. It's good play and fair play to Everton. You know, you saw the game. You were there. They deserved the point. Doesn't matter how the goals come.
Yeah, they did. And that was a brilliant delivery from James Garner, which sliced through the Tottenham Hotspur defence, flicked on by Romero and smuggled in by Branthwaite just about the far post. I spoke to Jared after the game and he said, I did touch it. Oh, yeah, I'm sure you did. It's fine. It's your goal. You celebrate it. He deserves it. He's been fantastic recently and he deserves all the plaudits that are coming his way. And when you play well, you get big rounds of applause. And when you don't play well, you get banners. And Roy Hodgson and Crystal Palace are getting banners at this moment in time, beaten down at the Amex by 4-1. Brighton unrecognisable from their 4-0 thrashing against Luton. I could have told you very early on Saturday they were never going to be as bad as they were in midweek. I thought they were definitely going to beat Palace. That was the biggest sort of nailed on absolute stonewall banker this weekend. And they did. They were superb. Palace were poor, and their players ended up arguing with fans afterward. There were chants of "We want Hodgson out." Assistant coach Paddy McCarthy had to pull Anderson and Henderson away from angry travelling fans. Not necessarily scenes that you want to see, but you can understand why Palace feel that they're a club in stasis, Kevin.
Yeah, they are in that position where they've generally been good enough to stay up, but they're not pushing on at all. And it's all a bit sad. What would have been nice, and I understand why Roy Hodgson felt that he'd earned the chance to carry on, and I understand that he feels, young enough and active enough to still do it, and that's absolutely fine. That's up to him. I think the club should have said to him in the summer, we have a plan going forward, and this is what we'd like to do. So thanks ever so much for keeping us up. We really appreciate it. But this is the manager we want to bring in, because this was always likely to happen. I don't think Palace will go down necessarily, but where are they actually going? And I just think now with we talked about toxicity, there is some toxicity there, no doubt about it. And every time there's a poor decision or a poor result or a poor performance, it's just going to be magnified. And I don't see how this is enjoyable for Hodgson in any way, shape or form. So I understand he doesn't want to walk away. I just think with somebody with the legacy that he has at Palace and the love for Palace he has, I just think it's all a bit sad.
I can't remember what newspaper he does his columns for, but there are many reporting as we record this podcast that Steve Parish is considering making a change at the top of the organisation. At this moment in time, there's one or two sort of names that are doing the rounds as possible replacements, but certainly it becomes one of those things that always happens when someone gets thrashed. It happened after the Arsenal game, but I think the Brighton game hurts a little bit more. But it does appear as if Steve Parish is thinking about making a change at this stage of the season. Is there any point to that, Scott, now? I mean, Palace's season, with all due respect, is probably over.
Well, it's not 100% over because they're only 5 points ahead of Everton, but we know that Forest and Everton may well, but not definitely, have a points deduction. Everton, obviously, for the second time. So you can't say it's over. Look, I think the question is, and I feel for Roy because we know what Roy is about. He's a very solid guy. And, clearly Steve Parish is thinking about the renovation of the main stand and the money going towards that. So not a lot of money was spent in the summer. Dean Henderson came in. So you got two top goalkeepers. They've had injuries to both of those. Young lad Brazilian who has had injuries as well. And to ask him to come in, I think would have been a heck of a lot. Lerma was on a free. And Rob Holding has had injuries. So not a lot of money was spent. So I think it was literally, can you keep us in the Premier League for one more year? And then we'll know where we are when it comes to the main stand and how much money we're going to sort of have to put aside for that. But in the meantime, for Palace fans, what are they watching? They're out the cups. They probably are safe, although not definitely. The question for me is, because I always think you look long term, is the right man out there? You said a couple of names have been mentioned. One springs to mind immediately, Steve Cooper, who is out there. And if you think he's the man for the long term, then get him in now. I talked about Chelsea and Pochettino when Frank Lampard came in. Why not get Pochettino in immediately or the moment you knew he was going to come in? If he ends up losing for the last 4 games of the season, so what? He's learned what about the players that he wouldn't learn in pre-season, and then suddenly the season starts. So if Steve Cooper's available and he's ready and the hierarchy want him, then, okay, I think they should look to that. If not, then have a look around. We know Roy is a safe pair of hands, but I do feel for the Palace fans, and being former Charlton, that's not an easy thing to say. There's nothing left for them this season.
Are you suggesting that you don't actually mean it? Is that what you're saying, really? You don't.
I'm suggesting.
Being diplomatic.
Don't tell Charlton fans this, but obviously we were at Sellers Park at the time when I came through the ranks, so yeah. I've got a bit of a soft spot of a Selhurst Park, if not for Crystal Palace.
Okay. Newcastle United 4, Luton Town 4. Another invaluable point for Luton, keeping their hopes of survival certainly alive. But they'll be kicking themselves, I think, Kev, because you don't score 4 goals away at St James's Park and walk away with nothing, do you? I mean, at some stage, you've got to think we've got to shut up shop. This game was just far too open.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Firstly, I think Scott danced out of that Charlton Palace thing very, very well by saying that he has a soft spot for the stadium. Yeah, he's very diplomatic there. I'm not sure I entirely believe him on that one. Yeah, I thought Luton were great,
Or if you've been there, you don't think that either.
Look, I think, yes, you're right. Luton will look at it and think we were 4-2 up and we should have won the game. However, I still think that is a terrific result. I think to go there and get a point, to go there and score 4, to go there and play with the variety they played with, because, Luton can be direct. We know that. They've got great pace up front. But when Barkley gets on the ball and drives forward from midfield, they play some lovely stuff. And I think they are starting to really, really impress and have done for a while. And I think they do look equipped to give this a real go and stay up. And if they do, they won't have bludgeoned their way to survival. No. They'll have played their way to survival. Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a couple of good goals during that.
Yeah.
There was a couple of good goals.
I think's terrific.
Brilliant.
Adebayo, I think's great. And there is a directness to them, but there's a real purpose about them. Everything they do, there's a real oomph behind it. And I think Barkley's really come to the fore. Newcastle weren't great. Absolutely. Dan Burn had a nightmare. They have looked really leggy and really disjointed at times, and all the things they did well last season seem to have just kind of crumbled away. But let's be fair, to an extent, this was always going to happen because they massively overachieved last season, and there was always going to be a reality check, and that's what we're seeing now.
Do you know what I like, though, right? I listened to Harvey Barnes afterwards. First of all, Harvey Barnes' goal was absolutely terrific. It was a beautiful caressing of a football into the corner from a very quick taken shot. And I remember speaking to Gary ONeal when he was a kid at Portsmouth coming through the ranks, and he was talking about scoring goals. He didn't think he scored enough goals. And he was talking to a coach, and he realised that you've got to hit the ball quicker and sharper. More one-touch finishes, you'll score more goals because you take the shot early, you'll catch people pull out. And Barnes takes his shot really early, but he caresses it brilliantly. But the thing that impresses me is that afterwards in his interview, he's talking about how it's been difficult for him, but he really wants to succeed at Newcastle. And then he says, and we scored the goal today and it was great, blah, 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 blah. But in the end, I couldn't help the team as much as I wanted to. And I thought, hold on, you were 4-2 down and you scored the goal that rescued a point. And you're massively disappointed about the fact that you haven't gone on and won the game, because it did have a chance actually to do so right at the very end of the match, Newcastle. So I just think, you can complain a lot about the recent results for Newcastle, but I do think that the spirit is still there and they believe that there's still more to come from that group. And I think actually they'll have a good end to the season. They'll be okay. And they'll go again next year. And I hope that they do, because if they start thinking about changing that manager, then you got real problems. You got real problems. Anyway, Scott, thank you very much for today. If you could try and resist cupping for the rest of the evening, that would be great. Same with you, Kev. You keep your hands to yourself. We'll be back on Thursday to preview all of the big action and talk about Chelsea's exit to Aston Villa in the FA Cup, I'm sure. No, it's going to be much better than that, Scott, isn't it? I'm sure. It's going to be okay, isn't it? Really? Please tell me. It's going to be.
I hope they'll be cupping then.
They'll still be in the cup rather than cup in. Yes, indeed. talkSPORT has all the breaking news whenever it happens, so make sure you tune into that and make sure you download the Premier League All Access podcast and tell all your friends about it.